Newsfirst Newsline with favours.
Hello there, very good evening and welcome to Newsline Live. Our guest this evening is almost straight from Parliament, and he's right here. He's a member of the SJB, and he does know a thing or two about finance. And of course, today there was the finance bill that was approved, so it's now the Finance Act. Let's find out a bit more, shall we? And our guest today, of course, is Mr. Eran Wickramaratne. Very good evening to you, Mr. Wickramaratne.
Good evening.
Now then, what happened today? This finance bill is now passed. It's the Finance Act now, is it?
Yes, the bill was passed, and generally speaking, the government has an overwhelming majority in Parliament. And therefore, when a bill is brought to Parliament, usually that bill will get passed. The question really we have to ask ourselves is, do we keep blindly voting, right, because we have a majority, or do we actually weigh the pros and cons of a bill and actually members of Parliament take a stand on what this is about? So the bill was brought to Parliament. Previous to that, it was taken to the judiciary, and it was canvassed for constitutionality. And then today they moved lots of amendments to the bill, and then they passed the bill.
What's so contentious about this bill?
Actually, when a bill is presented in Sri Lanka, you have only one opportunity to see if it is constitutionally consistent, and that is really a pre-legislative opportunity. So you take it, and then the Supreme Court normally will decide whether it needs a simple majority, whether it needs two-thirds majority, whether it needs a referendum, if a bill has to be passed. That is generally what the Supreme Court will do. So it looks at constitutionality. But members of Parliament like ourselves, right, we have to look beyond constitutionality. We have to also look at a bill and say, is this bill socially, politically, economically actually acceptable? Should we be actually passing this bill or not? So we in the opposition, right, the complete opposition, including of course we are the dominant party, the Samagi Jana Balawegaya, the SJB, we voted against this bill because we thought economically and politically this bill is really dangerous, right, and should not be passed. If I could, can I just explain in very brief the bill? The bill is, though it's called a finance bill, it's actually an amnesty being granted to those who haven't paid taxes.
Right.
Now this is not the first time that this is being done. This has been done according to Verite research. They said that it has been done about 13 times before. Over a number of years from about 1960s right down, 13 times before. So this is the 14th such move. Now normally when you go for amnesty like this is generally done, you know, once in a lifetime in a country. That is, if you have had some big social upheaval and a social revolution, and you are like displaced a dictator and you're going into a democracy or some major shift, political, social shift, then you go for this, and the intention of it is it has to raise you higher revenue, right? Then it brings people who are outside the tax system into the tax system, and there's a certain structural change that happens. But when you keep doing it like this, like, and this is the 14th time, it definitely will not have the impact of bringing in new money. But the thrust of this is those who have illegally either produce goods and services, it can be from alcohol to drugs to illegal activity to legally produced activity, but where taxes have not been paid, right? So it can in one sense make black money white, or if you have used undeclared money and even purchased assets within this country or overseas, it can be land and buildings in this country, it can be land and buildings overseas, it can be bank accounts, it can be foreign bank accounts that you hold. this is a way of legitimizing it, because what you do is between now and December 31st, you can go to the Inland Revenue Commissioner and you can make a declaration that you have had this income or this asset, you haven't paid the taxes, but now you want to declare it, and then what you have to pay is just 1%.
Just 1%.
Just 1% you can pay, and from that moment it is legal, and the information is so secretive that information can't be shared with anyone else.
And obviously the Inland Revenue is unlikely to send off the file to the FCID or to any other outfit.
It's not unlikely, it can't. It can't because
it's in the bill?
It's in the bill, it's a tax forgiveness, it's an amnesty, so you can't. So what are you really doing here? You are really encouraging people not to pay their taxes because they can wait for the 15th tax amnesty, right? And they can say, you know, why should I pay it? I'll wait a little longer, I'll declare it at that point and make it legal. So what are we doing here? There are honest people in this country, people who go every day to work, right? They pay their pay taxes, they go to work. Businesses which very, very honestly work, the big businesses in this country, the reputed businesses, they all been paying their taxes. It may be 15, 20, 24 is the highest tax rate at the moment.
I've got it written down here.
Yeah.
For example, if a company makes 100 rupees in profits, the company will have to pay corporation tax at 24%, and the shareholders, if they declare dividend, the shareholders need to pay 18%, and when you do the sums, the government on 100 rupees of profit from a corporate would stand to net, the government will make 37 rupees and 68 cents, leaving the corporate with 62 rupees. Now, they do this. Routinely, companies pay their taxes. But can I ask you this? Is tax avoidance a criminal offense? My second question to you is, in that case, what is tax evasion?
Yeah. So I don't want to hazard a guess, right? Because as I said, I'm not a lawyer, and I don't want to get into the technicalities. But I haven't seen anybody, right? Anybody really being convicted. And if it's a criminal offense, then there should be very high penalties for it, either financial penalties or basically being put in prison if it's a criminal offense, right? But I haven't seen that or heard about it in this country. So that's why I said I will leave that to the lawyers to really...
Can I ask you this? Generally speaking, tax avoidance is almost an international pastime. Because you find various ways to avoid paying the right amount, and you'd be rather creative. But certainly there is no mitigating any circumstance when it comes to tax evasion. If you evade taxes, generally speaking, all over the world, that's a crime. It's a criminal offense. So in that context, Mr. Wickramaratne, can I put it to you that this 1% is actually given to persons who are evading taxes or who have evaded taxes, and therefore these people are actually nothing other than traitors, because they don't put their country and its people first. They're putting themselves first. They've evaded these taxes, and they've obviously sought political patronage over the years, and then bang, this is the 14th time they get an amnesty. It's just 1%. All these other people, these other companies are paying 24%, the people are paying 15, 18%, and they're happily doing so. And these people are very simply traitors. Would you agree with me?
Yes, I mean, this bill is totally unacceptable. There is no question about that. Because when we are citizens, we have rights, and we always talk about rights and human rights and all kinds of democratic rights. But as citizens, we not only have rights, we also have obligations. And if we are to develop our country, right, even as citizens, we need to also look at our obligations. And our obligations are to others in society, right? When government gets tax revenue, they are using it for help. This pandemic has to be fought. When this pandemic is fought, government has to spend for the pandemic. Education. At the moment, children in Sri Lanka are not going to schools. It's one of the countries in the world who have had the most number of home days, not school days, home days, where children have stayed at home. And then we talk about online education. Most of the population don't have the instruments, they don't have the finances for the data to actually have online education. Now all that has to be funded with taxes. Social justice is also accomplished by using taxation. That's one principle of taxation. So it is those who earn who should pay. I was a CEO of a company, right? And then you have somebody who is earning 50,000 rupees a month, you have somebody who is earning 500,000 rupees a month. Social justice tells you that the people who earn more need to be paying more, not the people who earn less. So even in profits, right, it's those who are very profitable who have to make a bigger contribution in terms of taxes. So that principle of social justice is established. Here, what are we doing? We are legitimizing crooked people. And the other thing, Shaukat, is unlike in the past where people have an idea or a sense that if you have illegitimately either created money or you have evaded paying your taxes, right, then you say, okay, this must be stacked somewhere, the grandmother's story, it's under the pillow somewhere. It's not like that anymore. This black money often is in the system, it is circulating. You may have sometimes bought property, you may have assets or buildings, and you can have it here or elsewhere depending on the countries and the jurisdiction and how the law works. It's already in the system. What are you really doing now? You are going to legitimize it. You're going to legitimize it. And these are people who have often basically either got it ill-gotten or they have really not paid their obligation properly. So we were totally opposed to this bill, right, and we are thinking that why has the government did this? Now the Inter-American Development Bank, right, after studying, particularly countries in South America, they said that these tax amnesties add nothing. Mr. Wickramaratne did some research in 2010 on the Sri Lankan tax amnesties, and he also mentioned that in his research it shows that actually revenues haven't gone up. I will hazard a guess here. Actually government revenue will not go up in any significant way. But, because you are paying only 1%, right? But, right, rogues will get legitimized. Then people who are honest, companies which are honest, are obviously going to ask the question, why should we then be honestly paying these taxes?
Yes,
and we are encouraging a dishonest system.
So these people, and I suppose there must be companies as well in this, they tend to have a propensity to disregard the better good of the Republic, of the forgotten people, of rural areas that need bridges, they need roads, they need water, they need power, they need schools, and all this can only be funded by the government. But when the government is robbed of its fair share, it is absolutely incredible that they consider for the 14th time to give a tax amnesty and only charge them 1%. It sounds to me completely and utterly muddle-headed.
It is, and the thing is, they are safeguarded by law. When you pass a bill in parliament, it becomes a law of the country. Then they are safeguarded by law, so you can't take them before the courts of the country or anything like that, unless you change the law subsequently, and begin to look at that. So this whole issue about tax, right? There's another issue on tax. You have taxes which what you call are direct taxes, and then you have indirect taxes. Now the direct taxes are basically based on your income and generally based on your wealth, because some countries have wealth taxes as well. and then you have indirect taxes. So social justice requires that you have to have a fair balance between direct and indirect taxes. In Sri Lanka, indirect taxes are like 80%, direct taxes are 20%. But for a social justice system, it should be more like 50-50 or maybe 60-40, right? 60-40, but this is 80% are indirect taxes. So you look at this, the poor man, he goes to a boutique on the wayside, he drinks a cup of tea, the milk is taxed, right? Maybe the tea, depends, because the tea is largely exported, right? But there are some other probably taxes. The water is taxed. The gas that's used in the cooker to prepare that cup of tea is taxed.
Mr. Eran, what about the sugar?
The sugar is also, apart from all the hanky-panky that's going on presently, right? The sugar was taxed, but now the sugar tax has been removed. But even that benefit doesn't go to the poor man. You see, it's going to other people. So therefore, we have an unjust system here, unjust system, and we are actually strengthening that system, and we are strengthening the black economy. That is why we are opposed to this. We need reform. We need reform. I must say this, right, that during the period 2017 and 18, we did some reform. We brought a new Inland Revenue Act. That was one of the achievements of the former Finance Minister Mangala Samaraweera. He pushed through that Inland Revenue Act. And what did that Inland Revenue Act do? In 2015, right, the income for the country was 1.4 trillion, right, 1.4 trillion, right. It went up to 1.9 trillion, right, by 2018, and 2019 it was more level because we had lots of problems as remember in 2019, but 1.9 from 1.46 to 1.9. Taxpayers increased from around 890,000, right, to more than 1.5 million taxpayers. This is what the reform did, right? This is what the reform did. This was fair. This was good for the country in the long term. We are not interested in individuals. The system must be put right. If you are living in a very developed economy, right, but the infrastructure is high, living standards are high, people are earning well, everybody is a taxpayer, and that would be normal to be a taxpayer.
On that note, let's take a quick break and have a peek at this evening's headlines from Newsfirst's Primetime News team. We'll see you on the other side of the break.
Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
And welcome back to Newsline Live. I'm in conversation with the Member of Parliament from the SJB, Mr. Eran Wickramaratne. Thank you very much for your questions. You can send that by SMS on 0772 300 305. Card on your screen shortly. And we've got a message here from a former director at the Securities Exchange Commission of Sri Lanka, who clarifies that you can avoid tax with loopholes in the law, but you cannot evade tax. Thank you for that clarification, and thank you for watching Newsline. Now then, Mr. Wickramaratne, this sounds absolutely stupendous. It is more than muddle-headedness. There are many people out there, some of whom we call the forgotten people, out there in little hamlets, villages, towns even sometimes, where they need simple things like a bridge to cross over instead of putting a few planks. They need schools, they need their roads doing, they need opportunity. And none of this is possible because the government have very little money left over to spend. And we've got to a point where we can't even borrow so much anymore. What's going on? Why are these people elected time and time again into power when they're not doing very much practically for and on behalf of the people?
Shaukat, it's even more basic than that. You know, your channel has a program, Gammadda, and you see a lot of these things in the villages and the needs in it. But the problem is much deeper now, Shaukat, than that. The recent problem is even city dwellers, right? Yesterday, right, I was made aware, right, telephone calls, people try and send me pictures, right, where there are supermarkets. In a supermarket, you have foods that get outdated. It can be milk, it can be yogurt, it can be something else. And they are throwing this, right, into a garden or collecting it in a garden at the back of a supermarket, you know. And people are going, right, to that rubbish heap and taking things which are outdated, right, and they are taking it for consumption. And the people who are going there are not necessarily poor people, right? They are not beggars by profession. These are very decent people. So the issue is much deeper at the moment, that people are finding it a struggle to even meet their day-to-day needs and requirements in the family. That is why government taxes really matter, because it's only then that could be cushioned if the taxation is actually there. And the taxation came down drastically in 2019 with the election, when there was a promise made that we will do away with certain taxes. They did away with it. Government taxes crashed to 1/3. What is this? What are we doing? Now we think that by making black money white, that we can bridge this gap. You can't do it. It's not going to happen.
This is an interesting question from one of our regular viewers. Can't the opposition warn would-be black money investors that when the opposition come to power, they will be held accountable? The black money brigade.
We can warn them, right? And if we have the evidence, there are two things here. One, as you said, is evasion of tax, and the other is how was this money actually made. There are many complications in this, because you know, if you try to just open an account in a bank, they'll ask you so many questions because they want to know their customer, KYC policy. That's normal, right? But here, what are we doing here? We don't even know the source. The source is not known. So the source has to be established. So
it could be the importation and or sale of controlled drugs.
It can be anything. It can be anything, right? No, we have to decide. We are building a country. We are building a society. Are we going to build a country and a society within the framework of law? Are we going to build a country and society within the framework of some ethical basis? We have to decide, you know, where are we actually going, right? But otherwise, these laws are certainly not encouraging that. They are encouraging you to work outside the law, because if you are actually evading your tax payments, if you are not legitimately creating an income, what kind of society are we creating? And why is the government doing this? Because the research tells you, right? I told you about the Inter-American Development Bank. The research tells you there are some exceptions. Indonesia in 2008 or something, they had a windfall gain, but that was a one-time thing, because the US passed a law, and according to that US law, right, the FACTA, it was the Foreign Account Tax Compliant Act. So Indonesians who had invested in Singapore, suddenly the Singapore government had to tell Indonesia, according to being compliant with that law, who had invested. Immediately Indonesia had the benefit of it. So there have been some exceptions, but most of the time it doesn't work like that. Here it will not work like that for sure, because as it is said, some things you can do once, but you can't always do that.
But I think one of our viewers has a good point here. Well, one of them says, we don't need jogging tracks, highways and gyms at the present moment. I would go with that. But some of our viewers are making the point that if the opposition today, who are almost within touching distance in the seats of power, that if they take a hard stance and say, but listen chaps, you can do all this until we get there. Granted, you won't get their votes, but then they're only a small number, because the majority of the voters are out there, and they are, I would dare say, very patriotic and will be happy to pay their taxes. So why can't, will you take it on? Can you get your leader to make this statement and say, listen, watch out, because when we get there, we're going to get you?
Yes, I mean the framework, right, in really moving forward, the first thing that we need to do is basically establish that there will be the rule of law. That's the first thing we will do, because we need to bring the country risk down. That's why nobody looks at this country, because the country risk is high. So working within the framework of the law, honoring human rights, having an independent foreign policy, right, all this works in terms of really reducing the country risk. And that's the first thing we need to do. You know, this problem is like I keep saying, it's like having a worn out tire. You can't patch the tire and run this vehicle anymore. You have to replace that. So the first thing you need to do is the rule of law. So within that first principle that we will implement, certainly this is something we will look at. So sources of funding.
Yes, can you guarantee that when you come into power, your party will reverse this law with retrospective effect?
Yes, our party, shall I put it like this, it's the law will be redundant by the time we come in, Shaukat, because those who are going to legitimize their black money will do it now, but they know that they can't do it later. They will do it now. The issue is that we need to really look at that and say, right, what is the source of the funding? The tax, the taxes will have to be looked at separately, but we will have to look at what is the source of the funding. Is it legitimate or is it not legitimate? And the rule of law must apply in that situation.
Surely, isn't this a violation of the fundamental rights of the tax-paying public who have paid at the higher rate, and then you find a very special law for people who've evaded taxes and let them go at 1%? To me, that sounds as though there is a separate class of person, whereas Sri Lanka's constitution does not provide for two classes of people. It is just the one class. We are all equal before the eyes of the law.
Yeah, I completely agree with your argument. I see the inequality thing. We have to find legal ways of dealing with crooks and those who have robbed. We have to find legal ways of doing it. So one is we will look at the sources of that, and then we'll have to deal with that. Again, legally we'll have to deal with it. Because this law, presently, nobody gets the information. Nobody has the information. Only the Inland Revenue Commissioner will know about it, right? The Attorney General won't know about it. The land reform people will not know about it. The Anti-Bribery and Corruption Commission will not know about it. They have all been safeguarded through this law, right? And that is why we will have to look at that. So this amnesty is unacceptable.
Eran Wickramaratne, thank you very much for being on Newsline Live. We much appreciate your commentary, and we do hope that when you come into power, you will actually do something about this dreadful situation which is being perpetrated by people who are nothing other than traitors, who do not care about the people of this country. Take care, have a great evening, and as always, God bless you.